All right. Well, thank you all for being here today. Um, I am Kalisha. I am the the membership manager here at Civil Eats. And a little bit about Civil Eats. We are a nonprofit daily news source about the American food system. Our goal here is to shift the conversation around sustainable agriculture in an effort to build economically and socially just communities. We started in 2009, and in 2013, we became a fiscally sponsored project of a nonprofit. And then in 2020, we became a standalone nonprofit. As a nonprofit, only 10% of our funding comes from memberships, and the rest is largely from grants and donations. We do not take advertising dollars. Members like you fuel our work by supporting our reporting on a monthly and annual basis. Members receive our weekly newsletter, the members-only newsletter called The Deep Dish, invitation to these salons, and participation in our new Slack community. This is our second salon, which is a new benefit that we've been offering members, and so that we can all engage with each other. This is an interactive session and will come to life with your perspective, wisdom, and questions. We value your presence and your participation and want you to get the most out of our time together. Today, we'll hear from our senior staff reporter, Lisa Held, who will interview two experts on school meals, Cindy Long and Luis Guardia. The interviews will be one at a time. And during that time, you are able to submit any questions you have via the chat. And once we're done with both the interviews, we will get to as many of the questions as we can. Then afterwards, we'll open it up to hear from you about school meals, how school meals are affected in your community. And then after we're done with our call today, as we mentioned with the recording, we will share portions of it with the rest of the members. So I am going to now turn it over to Lisa. And Lisa, I'm going to pass to you now.
Thank you so much, Kalisha. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm excited to jump in and just thought before we start, I'm just going to provide a little bit of context. In preparation for this salon, I went back and looked at some of our reporting from the past few years. And in June of 2020, Civil Eats published what I would call kind of our first COVID era story on the growing call for schools to provide free meals for all students. That story was about that specific moment in time, just months into the biggest disruption school meal programs had ever seen. Congress was passing emergency laws to increase food aid. USDA was issuing waivers. School nutrition teams were packing food boxes and sending buses to deliver them. It was a really crazy moment. And I ended that story with this quote from Megan McGee, who is the director of school nutrition at Food Corps. Quote, "A lot of districts are going to feel the effects for years to come. This moment is exacerbating inequalities. The question is, how do we address them?" Now it's a little more than 3 years later, and we're here to talk about that question and other related questions. In the time since then, we have covered school districts where the pandemic has really decimated their budgets and affected their ability to feed the children in their schools. We've covered districts where extra grant money and flexibilities actually allowed them to improve their meal programs. We've covered racial gaps in meal access and policy debates around school meals. I think this moment we're in now is unique because the extra supports that were put in place for the state of emergency are all pretty much gone. And some indicators point to increasing need. So we just had annual data from the US Census Bureau last month that showed child poverty more than doubled from 5.2 to 12.4% since last year. So within that context, we're going to talk to our guest speakers about school meal access, what has changed in recent years, what hasn't, and what's ahead. And as Kalisha mentioned, we have two guests. We have Cindy Long, the Food and Nutrition Service Administrator at the USDA, and Luis Guardia, President of the Food Research and Action Center, commonly referred to as FRAC. And I'm going to interview each of them individually, and then we'll take your questions and get to as many of them as we can at the end. So let's jump in. Cindy, welcome. We need to
It's really great to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation, and thank you for all your work in lifting up the importance of school feeding programs during the pandemic.
Thank you so much for being here. I should say too, we're extra appreciative because we kind of ended last week thinking that this might not happen because of the potential government shutdown. So
Right.
We're glad to have you. So let's start kind of big picture. I just talked a little bit about the disruptions from the pandemic. Are there specific ways in which the pandemic's disruptions changed the agency's thinking around, or sort of the big picture approach to school meal access?
Yeah, well, maybe to state the obvious, I think the biggest learning from the experience of the pandemic was the importance of healthy school meals for all as the right approach. So that's why, here at USDA, we were so pleased and so proud that the strategy coming out of last year's White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health really featured committing to a pathway to healthy school meals for all as one of its key elements. We saw how much this helped combat food insecurity during the extraordinary events of the pandemic, but it also showed us the benefits that are there anytime, that it's really a necessary part of a quality school day. It gives all families the security of knowing that their kids will be fed nutritious meals. It allows schools to focus on what they should be focused on, which is academics, and in the cafeteria, nutrition, instead of processing forms and tracking who's eating. It really can put nutrition programs on a more stable footing because of the larger and steadier participation and the predictability that goes along with that. And it also really enhances the quality of the school environment by eliminating any stigma that's associated with eating your meals in the cafeteria. It eliminates meal debt. And so just a lot of things that are currently challenges with the program. So we are really happy. We were, of course, very disappointed that Congress didn't continue the approach nationally, but we're thrilled to see the momentum in the states, which is something I'm sure we'll talk more about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I guess it might sound kind of obvious, but you're sort of saying the administration's position is that free school meals for all is really the direction we should be heading. But at the federal level, we don't have that right now, right? But that's essentially requires an act of Congress.
Yes, to make it a national program, it absolutely requires an act of Congress.
Okay. So, and one of the things the USDA has done, that actually this just happened last week, that a major change to the community eligibility provision was finalized,
right?
Which is kind of like a universal school meal program that individual schools can adopt, right?
Right.
So can you kind of explain how that works, just for anyone who doesn't know, and talk a little bit about what exactly the agency changed?
Yeah, absolutely. So community eligibility has actually been around for a little over 10 years. And it's an option. Well, let me step back. If you think of the traditional school meals program, you probably think about schools sending home forms and families filling them out. And that's how folks were identified as being eligible for free reduced price meals. Community eligibility provides an alternative for schools in lower income areas, where instead of having to do those applications, they can just feed all their kids. And their reimbursement from the feds is determined by looking at other data, primarily data from SNAP and other means tested programs. And then there's a formula for how much the federal government reimburses them. And if the federal reimbursement doesn't cover everything, then the state or locality needs to cover the rest. There are currently about 20 million kids in about 40,000 schools using CEP. And we were super excited last week to make the change in CEP that you mentioned, because that is something we can control, unlike funding for a universal program. It doesn't require an act of Congress. So what we did is that, as I mentioned, the program is limited to schools in lower income areas. And before this change, that meant that 40% of the kids had to be on SNAP or some other means tested program. And based on this new rule, we now can extend the availability to schools that meet a 25% threshold instead of 40%. So that's going to give more districts an option. And it's also going to be really important in supporting states that have gone to universal programs, because it'll make the program administratively easier for those states to operate.
Interesting, that connection with the state programs.
Yep.
I hadn't thought about that. One thing that has come up a lot when I've covered CEP is that, you know, a lot of advocates we're pushing for this change that USDA made, and in sort of allowing more schools to be eligible to offer this as their approach, but that as the schools at the lower threshold adopt CEP, that it can be really unaffordable if the formula for reimbursement doesn't change. So is that something USDA is aware of, and can you change that formula to help schools afford to adopt CEP?
Yeah, we are absolutely aware of that. So a couple things. The president's budget for 2024 did include a request for Congress to expand funding and allow us to make a change in the formula that determines how much that federal reimbursement is. Unfortunately, they have not yet acted on that, and given the state of our budget situation, I'm personally not holding my breath for this year. You know, in terms of the challenges that schools with a lower threshold have, you know, it's certainly true. As I mentioned, the federal reimbursement depends on how many kids you have in SNAP, essentially. And as there are fewer and fewer, the district has to kick in more. But we do believe there are districts out there that will, you know, find the resources from somewhere. And again, if you're in a state with a universal program, I don't know if folks have thought about this much, but those schools that aren't CEP still have to take applications because they need some way to figure out their federal reimbursement. And so now in those states, all the schools that are at the 25% threshold can switch to CEP. They don't have to fool with applications. So it reduces the administrative burden, and it just makes it much more straightforward.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because the other thing I was going to ask you about is the kind of burden of processing all of those applications. That's something you hear so much from school nutrition directors, and especially post-pandemic, because no one had to fill out those applications for years, and they kind of forgot how to do it, or and yeah, so one thing you mentioned, you know, with CEP, a lot of the enrollment happens because students who are already enrolled, the families are in SNAP, they get automatically certified, and a lot of school food advocates want certification to happen through other programs like Medicaid. Is that something that USDA can do, and if so, are you considering it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And we usually use SNAP as the shorthand for the other program data, but it does include Medicaid in states that are part of a special demonstration project to do direct certification with Medicaid. And as you mentioned, there's been a lot of interest in that. It's been going on since 2012, and we've been slowly adding states to the demo. In fact, we just not too long ago added 12 new states, which brings the total up to 38 states who are in this project that, again, does have direct certification between school meals and Medicaid, which is something that really does facilitate the use of CEP.
Great. I want to talk a little bit about summer programs, because, you know, school meals, we tend to think about the months kids are in school, but those kids are from families that are struggling to feed the family, you know, all year long, right? So at the end of last year, Congress made some big changes to what will be available during the summer, allowing summer meals to be served offsite and making summer EBT permanent. One question I had is USDA tracking the impact of those changes? How will we know if they're really making a difference, and do we know if it had an impact this past summer?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me just say we were beyond thrilled when the Congress, somewhat surprisingly, and on a bipartisan basis, passed these provisions, because it gives us what we consider a historic opportunity to expand service in rural areas by offering grab and go and delivery options. And then secondly, to allow a permanent summer EBT program to provide cards to families with free and reduced price kids during the summer months. So in terms of your question about evaluation, the rural piece just started this past summer. And so we will have some probably, you know, fairly basic data on like the number of entities that were providing the service, where it was happening. But we are working on doing some much more in-depth evaluation that will include not only, descriptions, but also looking at the impacts. With respect to summer EBT, we're going to do the same thing, but I do want to note that it actually doesn't start until next summer. So we wouldn't have any data on that yet.
Okay. So we'll have to get you back here to ask you that question.
Yeah, well, actually, Lisa, if you don't mind, let me say one thing though that it's really important. Even though the national program doesn't start until this coming summer, we have had demonstration projects for a number of years, and those have been rigorously evaluated. And they show really strongly that the approach of giving families cards during the summer does reduce the incidence of childhood hunger and also has positive nutrition benefits. So it is definitely evidence-based policy.
Got it. You mentioned nutrition, and nutrition security is a big talking point for Secretary Vilsack, has been a priority. I actually interviewed Stacy Dean last year about the transitional nutrition standards that USDA had implemented. And one thing she said that I wanted to ask you about is that the agency was prioritizing hearing from parents and kids on the ongoing implementation of those standards. I wanted to ask you, how has USDA done that? Are you engaging with schools and families to understand the impacts of those standards, and in general, just, in terms of school meal access and how this is affecting families?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you mentioned, we do have a proposed rule that's out there to continue the great work that school nutrition professionals have done over the past decade that has really made school meals the healthiest place where kids get their meals. And so we just really see this as a continuation of that process. But as Deputy Undersecretary Stacy Dean said, we also know that it's really critical that these standards be operational and they work for everybody who's involved. So as we were developing the proposed rule, we had over 50 formal listening sessions with everyone from school districts, nutrition professionals, state agencies, advocacy groups, tribal stakeholders, food manufacturers, parents organizations, teachers organizations, to help us inform the proposal. And I will also tell you that since we published the proposed rule, we've gotten over 136,000 comments from the public. And, so that I think is an indication of how important school meals are to folks. And I really will stress, we take the feedback really seriously. We took the feedback we got prior to developing the proposal seriously. We will take the formal feedback from the rule very seriously, because we want these final standards to be both supportive of dietary science and to move the ball forward, but they've got to be implementable in the schools. And so we really are laser focused on that as our final result.
Yeah, that's the most comments I've ever heard of on a rule, and I look at a lot of rules. That's kind of crazy. I do need to move to Luis soon, but I did want to just quickly ask you a question about climate. So we talked about nutrition security as another priority, and Secretary Vilsack has also kind of stated that addressing the climate crisis is a priority. And climate change will affect everything. We know that, right? It will certainly impact students and the food that's available to them in the coming years. Is the agency doing anything to integrate climate concerns into school meal programs? One thing that comes to mind for me is that USDA Foods is a huge purchaser of food. And is there a way that you can integrate some of that thinking around climate there?
Yeah, well, I'm sure this is a huge priority for the Secretary. USDA has invested record amounts around the voluntary adoption of climate smart practices. But looking into the school food world, I will say that our focus, I think, in the past has been around reducing food waste. And we continue to have efforts, including our food and agriculture service learning program, to help engage kids around reducing food waste. You ask a great question about USDA Foods, and we are looking at a whole variety of different ways to modernize USDA Foods, including how do we make like more local and regional foods, more accessible within our distribution model. And it's something that is a priority, and we're starting to take steps to pilot test certain things. And so I will say there's still work to do there, but we do recognize that as major buyers of food, that is another lever that's available to us.
Great. I would like to ask you more about those steps, but I already went way over our time. So
I'm sorry, I'm a big talker.
It's okay. I'm just going to say thank you so much for this conversation. I'm going to switch over and talk to Luis. And if you can stick around, a reminder to everyone that we're going to have questions for Cindy and for Luis after. So please submit your questions in the chat. And Cindy, I'll see you in a few. All right. Hi, Luis. Welcome. I think
Hi, Lisa. Sorry, I was on mute.
it's okay. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. This is I'm delighted to be part of this conversation.
And before I jump in, actually, I didn't really give a lot of background on FRAC. So do you want to just give a quick, one sentence description for people who don't know FRAC about what you do?
No, absolutely. Thanks, and thanks for the opportunity. So FRAC is an organization that's been around for 50 years, and we are here to improve the health, nutrition, and well-being of people who are struggling with poverty-related hunger across the United States. And we do this through partnership, we do this through advocacy, and we do this by pushing forward bold and innovative solutions to advance more equity and ultimately the end of hunger.
Great. I'm going to ask you a little bit about what we just heard from Administrator Long. You do a lot of work on policy with school meal access, and I'm curious what your take is on USDA's actions on school meal access over the past few years, and especially right now. As an advocate, how do you see the work they've done, and is there anything specific that Cindy said that you'd like to respond to?
Yeah, no, they've been doing great, and even though I think she can't hear me, I think it's I just want to point out a few things. The first was after you mentioned the reporting you had done earlier in the pandemic, and it's important to note that in the first 2 years we had school meals offered to all students at no charge. That was a huge deal, and also there was a high-end reimbursement for those meals, and that was tremendous. And I think one of the things that we're seeing, were certainly the benefits of that, how people how it really made a difference in the lives of so many children and families. And more recently, some of the things that we were talking about with Cindy were around the expanded community eligibility, which has allowed more high poverty schools to provide meals at no charge. I think the last count was around 3,000 more districts are now able to participate. So really tremendous work, but I'm an advocate, and I wouldn't be worth my weight in salt if I didn't say this is great. But we and we kind of alluded to this in some of the conversation with Cindy. There's still more work that needs to be done.
So let's talk about that, specifically on the community eligibility. You mentioned 3,000 more districts are eligible, but my question was, are they going to be able to do it financially based on the current system? Can you speak to that, or are there any other ways that you think the community eligibility provision should be improved or expanded further?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like I said, more needs to be done, but this is we should be, and we are very pleased at the progress that has been made on this, and particularly Lisa, at a time when we were talking about the U.S. Census data and how more people are experiencing poverty. An alarming number of children about 1 in 8 are now experiencing hunger in America, which is just really unconscionable. And we talked about some of the benefits of the CEP program, for example, and not having the need to process school meal applications. But one of the things that we do know is that the proposed rule, it does not increase the amount of federal funding that a community eligibility school receives. And so I think we need to find ways to make sure that these schools that are newly eligible will find it a viable financial program for them to take advantage of. So we alluded to this a little bit before, but we do need Congress to do its part to increase the federal funding for community eligibility. And there is a vehicle in place for that. It's called the School Meal Expansions Act. And I think that'll is an important thing to improve the program and of course bring us closer to what we at FRAC have been calling for a long time, and that is to see healthy school meals for all available to all of our students, full stop.
Is that School Meal Expansions Act? To talk a little bit more about that, is that something that would be attached to a child nutrition reauthorization?
Well, I think the Congress, as you said, the Congress has a lot on their hands right now. So we're going to continue to push for and expand on all the things that are necessary for folks to have more access to nutrition, and for kids to have more access to nutrition. I think one of the things here that we're going to do is we want to make sure that certainly that can be part of it. We want to continue to to also have people think about universal meals, and I think one of the things that we're seeing, particularly as we talk about the states that have adopted it, we know that there are just a tremendous amount of benefits, and I find it kind of interesting that even though we weren't able to get the ball over the into the end zone, if you will, on the federal front, states are really seeing the need, and I think states, because states and localities are much closer to the need, and they're very close to their communities. A lot of them have stepped up. So I think this is as we look towards potentials for getting this through Congress and things like like Enhancing School Meals Act, we should also not lose sight of other important legislation such as the Universal School Meals Program Act as well.
But I mean, I think you're kind of very nicely saying that at the federal level, there's pretty much no chance at this point that universal school meals is going to go anywhere anytime soon, right?
Well, there's as Cindy was mentioning, there's a lot going on, but I think it's important that because they can take this up again, so we need to make sure that some of these marker bills and some of these initiatives, like the expansion of community eligibility, pushing forward for healthy school meals for all, that we don't let up on that we don't say, oh, gee, they're not going to take it up right away. Let's kind of park that to the side. We need to, one of the things that we know throughout the pandemic is that, that we learned a lot, and we need to make sure as a community, we keep communicating to the public, to legislatures, all those benefits that we saw through some of the allowances and the waivers that were provided, because this is something that really needs to be part of the school day.
Right. So, given the kind of lack of action in Congress, you mentioned you're looking a lot at states, and a lot of states have passed bills related to school meal access. What are some of the things you're seeing? Like, I know that each state has done things kind of, some of the bills are the same, some are different in various ways. What are some of the things you're seeing that you think are really kind of driving things forward in a positive way within the states? Like, are they, where is it working really well?
Yeah. So I'll tell you what we're hearing. So we're hearing, not surprisingly, dramatic increases in participation for both breakfast and lunch. And this is coming again at a time when childhood hunger and childhood poverty is spiking. We're also hearing how this is improving students' attendance, how it's improving behavior, how it's affecting academic achievement, and how it's reducing tardiness. So there are, that's kind of what we're hearing, and that's what we, to my earlier point, that's what we. Forgive me. That's what happens when you talk with your hands a lot. You might hit the mute button. These are the things that we need to make sure people are reminded of. And we currently have 8 states that have passed permanent policies: California, Colorado, New Mexico, Minnesota, Michigan, Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts, and Nevada is providing free school meals now for the second year old. So I think, and in terms of kind of to continue the movement on this, we have a National Healthy School Meals for All Coalition. This is a diverse group of national anti-hunger, education, child advocacy groups, a bunch of people who come together and are looking to build on this momentum. And if I could, I would plug our freeschoolmealsforall.org site, which people can learn more about the coalition, learn more about how to participate in this effort.
Got it. I wanted to ask you specifically about the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health. I actually saw you there exactly 1 year ago, almost exactly 1 year ago, right? And that was a really big deal. It hadn't been done in 50 years. And I guess I'm curious now, kind of there's this reflective moment, what actually came out of it, because it was a year ago. Is there anything specific that you have seen come out of that conference that has changed school meals and kind of improved things in terms of child hunger in general?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, first of all, was to call attention to it, right? That was a huge thing in and of itself, to say, we're going to have the president come and speak to us about ending hunger, that the White House is going to put together a national strategy on it, and work, and also a cross-agency approach. So, when we're looking at this stuff, we're always, we tend to look at USDA for relief and support, but we know it's going to take a whole government approach really to end hunger more broadly. Everybody from energy department to commerce to labor to school education. So many elements are important to make this all work. But as far as the school meals program and what we've seen there, the White House conference had sort of at the top of their list universal meals, and kind of creating the pathway for that, and sort of saying that that's kind of what we want to get to was tremendous, because we need to make sure that people understand that this is this is a critical element to not just addressing nutrition, but all the other interconnected things that we know are connected with nutrition, child poverty and good health, and a variety of other things. The other thing that the conference called for was for summer EBT, and we then later saw that come out of the omnibus at the end of last year. So this, I think just a couple of things to note, flowing, out of the White House. We've seen that the president's budget include increased funding for community eligibility. So we're excited to see that, and we love to have folks support that. And of course, all the great work that Cindy and the team at USDA are doing to implement summer EBT in the next summer that's coming up.
Great. Okay, Luis, thank you so much for your time. I think we're gonna move into some questions for you and for Cindy from our members. And I have a few. I'm gonna look through these and start to put these to you. And if we don't get more, I can always keep asking you questions. I always have extra. Okay, so we have a question from Janet. This is a kind of a technical question. I don't know if either of you have this in front of you, but she's asking, how much was the pandemic reimbursement increment? I think what she means is like how much more were schools being reimbursed during the pandemic compared to now?
Well, I can explain that, I think, a little bit. There were two things that happened during the pandemic. First, all the meals got reimbursed at a free level, which was a whole bunch of more resources. And then on top of that, instead of providing them the amount that they get in the school meal program for free meals, we were able to use the amount that you would get in the summer, which is higher. I don't have the numbers stuck in my head, but it's on the order of about 20% higher. So they're all free and then 20% higher on top of that.
Right. Another question about cost, and this is a question I've seen a lot, so I think it's good that we're addressing this from Summer. If universal school meals were to be passed, would it be financially sustainable? What would the cost of a program like this look like versus current school meal funding? I don't know, Luis, does FRAC, I think FRAC has maybe looked at this data before.
Yeah, we had. I mean, we believe it. You know, it could be sustainable. There's when it was last up for consideration. Although then back then there were other budget competing priorities, and that's sort of the messaging we heard back as to why it would make it. But I think one of the things that we need to think about, you know, in addition to the cost, are sort of all the other knock-on benefits that we see now. You know, I elaborated a few in terms of reduced poverty, improved health, better, the higher academic achievement, and better better outcomes in terms of the child's experience overall in school. Not to mention that we talked about stigma earlier on, and how school meal debt and some of the lunch shaming practices affect that. So it's from where I stand, I think it's incredibly well worth it.
And I don't have the data in front of me, but I know I've seen some calculations that look at savings related to labor costs because of all that administrative labor that goes into the certifying, and so I know schools have been able to save some money there. We have a question from Lexi Wong. Cindy, this is for you. Could you elaborate on the steps the USDA is taking to purchase and distribute more local and regionally grown food?
Sure. We let me start with resources. So our sister agency, the Agricultural Marketing Service, which basically provides support to producers, has had a series of grants. I want to say it's been over $200 million to provide funding for states specifically to support local food in schools. It's the LFA, Local Food in Schools grant. I think about more than half of the states have received those funds, and states have a lot of flexibility in how they do it. In some cases, states are directly purchasing from local producers and providing it to schools. In other states, they're making connections, but that's a significant infusion of funding. We've had the opportunity to significantly enhance our farm to school grants in the past couple of years to the tune of about 50 additional million. And then in terms of just trying to make it easier for folks to purchase local and regionally grown products, part of our proposed school meals rule, the one that deals with the meal standards, would provide more flexibility. It would allow schools to provide a direct preference in their purchasing for local or regional foods. So we're looking at this on multiple fronts.
Got it. So I think that's all of our questions. I guess just to close out, I kind of had a question that I'd love for both of you to answer. We're talking about school meals, but I mentioned that stat on child poverty at the start, and I can't help thinking about how school meal access is one component of this larger issue in terms of families not having enough to eat. And I just love to hear your thoughts on why are so many families dependent on school meals, and what kind of fixes can we think about that dig deeper and get at the root causes of child poverty in this country?
You want to go, Cindy?
Now you can go ahead. I'll add.
Yeah. So first of all, I would start from the premise that we believe that all families should have access to meals. That should be a given. And I think, Lisa, kind of one of the things that your question is getting at is when that goes missing, when that's not there, what does that tell us? And that tells us that people are struggling with a lot of the root causes of poverty and hunger. So we know how this is intertwined with so many other issues that families are dealing with, including healthcare, housing costs, having steady wages, systemic discrimination. All these things are feeding into why people are ending up in hunger. And you mentioned, we mentioned earlier, we referred to it a couple of times now, how the poverty rate, particularly with children, has doubled. And so when we see numbers like this, we do need to ask ourselves, what is it that we can do? And certainly the work that USDA is doing, the work that these programs are doing, are absolutely essential to this. In terms of providing people with benefits like SNAP and WIC. I'd be remiss in not mentioning a significant portion of SNAP and WIC recipients are children as well. So all these programs need to work together to bring people the nutrition need and help lift people out of poverty, so that they have more equitable economic opportunities. Is ultimately what we want to see. So and we know that just during the pandemic, school meals lifted about 1.5 million children out of poverty. So much like Cindy, like Cindy was saying, she's looking at this and people at USDA are looking at this, very, very carefully, looking at the data, and I think it sort of does speak for itself that these programs do work, but it does not relieve us of the responsibility for dealing with some of these other root causes, which are absolutely essential.
And do you want to add anything before we finish up?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I think Luis did a great job of kind of talking about the big picture. So maybe what I'll focus on is take it down to the individual level. I've had the pleasure really of working in school meals for a really long time. So I have been in many, many schools. I've talked to, the nutrition professionals for decades, and sort of whatever point in time it is, whatever the economy's like, whatever kind of community it is, whether it's one that seems high need, one that doesn't seem high need, what you always hear from them is that, some of these kids, they really rely on these programs. It's the only food they get, or you'd never know, but there are kids even in this school that need it. And so I think that really just underscores that how important it is for these programs to be there for those kids that need it, because they are kids. And, whatever sort of the larger debate about the, how to best structure these programs, what should be means tested, what shouldn't, these are kids. And I don't think that anyone wants to embrace the idea of individual kids going hungry in a school, which again is why these programs are so important and why it's so important to make them available to all kids, because there is need everywhere at all points in time. It may look different from place to place.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for your time. We really appreciate you being here. And I'm going to turn this back over to Kalisha for member updates, but I'm going to say Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for the conversation, and Luis and Cindy for engaging us. We've got about 10 minutes left, and so what I think I'd like to do is I want to just we said we're going to do some member discussion. So I'm going to maybe allow one or two people, if there's any, think about anything that you learned from Luis and Cindy that may inform you in the work that you do, or maybe you'll do something differently, or just even any comments about the information, or if there's anything that you want to share about what you're doing in your own community, or what's going on in your community as it relates to school meals. So if you want to raise your hand, you can. Feel free to use the chat. If no one has questions or any comments, that's totally fine as well. But I want to give us a few minutes to open it up to have you all engage. Janet.
Yeah,
Get
I
your
have
go.
a couple of comments. I hope that that's okay.
Sure.
One is that there are a couple of additional arguments for universal free school meals that I think deserve to be stressed as we try to build consensus for healthy school meals for all. I was thrilled to see a YouGov poll reporting that more than half of American adults support universal free school meals. I've been watching this issue for a long time, and that's a big change from how it used to be. And when we think about how to build on that momentum and expand it, I think that it's good to pay attention to the error rates. The error rate for direct certified kids is very, very low, but the error rate based on household family applications is more than 20%. It's more than 1 in 5 applications are misclassified. And this is another way of saying that schools are not set up to administer a means test, and we don't really want them doing that. So that's just one argument I think we should add to our list. And the other one is that when you have universal, when everyone is invited to the table, then you can really make strides in integrating the meal with food education. And our children need food education because they are exposed to hours every week of food miseducation in the form of advertisement. So food education is not, oh gee, something else to add to the curriculum. It's something that all Americans really need, because we are exposed to so much misleading information about food. So I just wanted to put those two arguments on the list.
Thank you for those comments, Janet. We will give a minute for one more. Anyone else have anything they want to share?
I'd also like to ask Lisa, in her reporting, that question that was raised about, well, what would be the price tag on universal? That is a figure that would be really great to have. And I hope you can pursue it.
Yeah, I'll send you an email, Janet, because I know that there has been quite a bit of research on it, and I don't want to misstate because I don't have it in front of me. But I am quite sure that there's sufficient evidence that while it seems like it would be a lot more expensive, there's significant cost savings involved. And it's not, even though intuitively you would think, well, for feeding more students, it's going to cost a lot more. There are ways that these programs save on other factors.
For sure. Great. I'll look for it.
Thank you. Well, in the interest of time, well, I see, Andrea, did you have a question? I saw you came off mute. I want to honor that if you've got something brief. Okay, well, I want to respect our time here and conclude our conversation, and thank you all for your time today. This has been very, very valuable for all of us, and we really appreciate connecting with you all. If you have further questions or input, feel free to reach out to either me at our members email that you received the reminder to, and I'll put that in the chat as well. We also have a Slack channel, if you're not aware, that, you know, we can keep the conversation going there. So if things come up at that point that you want to chat about with other members, we do have that channel. So I put the invitation in the Slack, and I'll share that in any follow-up that we have. And yeah, also stay tuned to our members only newsletter, The Deep Dish, for upcoming salons and other announcements. And we hope that you all have a good rest of your day. So thank you all for joining us.